Yes, the enemy is trying to continue its offensive along the entire front line, which is now over 1,200 kilometers long. At the same time, the Russians are suffering enormous losses in the Pokrovsk area. Just in January, the Russians lost 7,000 personnel irretrievably. That's more casualties than in the entire Second Chechen War. This was reported by Viktor Trehubov, a representative of the Operational Strategic Group of Troops Khortytsia. To see what's happening right now in the Pokrovsk area, watch the exclusive report from military correspondent Andrei Tsaplienko.
Take cover. An aerial bomb landed somewhere nearby in a routine manner. Let me remind you that we are somewhere near Pokrovsk. The battery commander is getting his soldiers into cover, but it's not possible to hide there for long. We need to manage the battle to send the enemy a response for the strike. Right now, the Caesar gun is moving to a combat position. There is enemy advancement. We need to stop him and stabilize the front line. And it seems that the artillery of the 155th Brigade can handle this task. Knock on the door. The French Caesars are operating 24/7. What was that?
Our neighbors are working.
The accuracy of the French artillery is currently preventing the enemy from realizing their plans. The obvious plan is to bypass Pokrovsk from the north and south and try to encircle the city. The Russians have almost reached the outskirts of Pokrovsk, but they didn't decide to storm it head-on.
The enemy is operating in small assault groups, a maximum of 10 people, but there are a lot of them. I call this the Tarakanov tactic. They are trying to distract our attention, advancing simultaneously in small groups in many directions.
If the occupiers manage to gain a foothold somewhere in the suburbs of Pokrovsk, Leopard 2s fly into the village. The 155th Brigade is dismantling the houses where the enemy infantry is holed up.
The equipment is great, it drives well, the gun is accurate, it has no analogs in terms of driving performance, but ours already.
We had doubts about whether they would be effective in Pokrovsk. These are wheeled tanks with a 105mm gun.
This is a cumulative shell. These are high explosive fragmentation shells, and here are armor-piercing ones.
But the French quality speaks for itself. The relatively small caliber is compensated by the accuracy of the gun and the maneuverability of the vehicle. So far, the AMX-10 hasn't let us down.
We can quickly roll up on the enemy and just as quickly pull back from them. It's highly maneuverable because it can easily turn around in the same spot.
When an extra second on the battlefield can cost lives, this feature of French technology becomes crucial. The newly formed brigade has been planned. Every newly created brigade probably goes through a certain period of crisis, and unfortunately the 155th Anakiv was no exception. But we hope that this period is coming to an end. The guys have learned to fight well with French equipment, and the command has realized that the most important thing in war, no matter how advanced the technology is well-trained and motivated people. Łapeczwit. The brigade is named after Anna Kivska, the legendary Queen of France, daughter of Yaroslav the Wise. The only unit named after a woman. The first one is fully armed and trained by the French. Right now, the Pokrovsk 155 is a key formation that is holding back the enemy's advance. The fighters are starting to feel that they can stop the Russian assaults, and it's this feeling of confidence in their own abilities that helped them stabilize the front. But it's possible that the situation around Pokrovsk could worsen. After the Ukrainian units withdrew from another key settlement in the Donetsk region, Velika Novosilka.
And also, this week, the Russians once again cruelly and treacherously attacked the Ukrainian city of Kherson. The Russians struck the city center with aerial bombs. The nearby villages to Kherson are also suffering. 3 dozen were under fire. In the region, 1 person died in a day, and another 13 were injured. Among the injured are 2 children. They were just riding on a bus that the occupiers hit with a drone. The chronicles of one day in Kherson were gathered by TSN correspondent Elena Vanina.
The center of the city of Kherson. Around 4 o'clock yesterday, the Russians dropped an aerial bomb here. Instead of beautiful houses, ruins remain here in an instant. 2 residents were rescued from blocked homes and 2 others were injured. A 40-year-old woman sustained blast injuries. Another 46-year-old resident was pulled from the rubble. To be continued. She is in serious condition with a traumatic brain injury and shrapnel wounds to her abdomen. People can't recover from what they've been through. The glass shattered all around me. Everything just fell apart. Thank God I'm fine. Nothing happened to me. Well, this is happiness.
I was standing in the kitchen. I have a metal plastic window, which is the only one left. And it just shifted from its place and I was thrown back against the wall by the wave.
Oksana is going through this for the second time. In December, she was flown to her apartment. Back then, she was barely alive with a broken arm and was rescued from the rubble in the same way. The woman was recently discharged from the hospital. And once again, the shelling, you can't put it into words, you just can't put it into words.
You can't put it into words when you know that feeling, when it's you yourself. I was trapped under the rubble myself. It was on this very street. I found myself in my own apartment with 8 little cats. I feel very sorry for this person. I feel very sorry for these people.
An hour before the airstrike, the enemies dropped explosives right into the hatch of a minibus. The cabin caught fire and there were 5 people inside. 3 women and 2 children, a 12-year-old girl and a 13-year-old boy. Everyone has been hospitalized with concussions, explosive injuries, and traumatic brain injuries. And just a few hours before that, Russian military dropped explosives on an ambulance from a drone. The medics miraculously survived.
Acute stress reaction trauma injuries. As of today, their condition is considered closer to satisfactory.
Closer to suffocating. Closer to suffocating. Suffocating. And this is a high-rise building in the Dnipro district. In the morning, a Russian drone flew in there and a fire broke out. Injured. A 74-year-old resident.
Smoke started coming in, and it was so thick that he said, "Call the fire department." I said, "Come on, call." And what I had left, I didn't even take my phone. I couldn't get here anymore.
In the same area, they shelled the private sector. An elderly woman died there. A 50-year-old man was injured. In the evening and morning, enemy drones injured 3 more civilians. According to reports from the Kherson military administration, in January alone, 29 people were killed in the Kherson region and 237 were injured.
A day of mourning in the Izium community in the Kharkiv region. As a result of the Iskander strike the day before, 5 people died there and more than 50 were injured. 3 people are in critical condition, including a 14-year-old girl who was urgently taken to the hospital in the regional center. TSN correspondent Yulia Boyko spoke with witnesses of the explosion and is ready to tell more about the destruction in the city and the shattered lives of local residents.
The air is filled with dust and smoke. After the explosion, cars are wailing. These are the first footage after the Russian Iskander hit the center of the city of Izium. The epicenter of the strike hit the administrative buildings where people from all over the area were coming to process their documents. Among them were 2 sisters. 18-year-old Daria and 19-year-old Angelina. The older girl was 15 weeks pregnant. They arrived at the passport office with their mother-in-law and died. Dr. Yuri Kuznetsov, who was one of the few medical professionals in Izium during the occupation, says he has seen a lot during this time, but he will long remember the husband of the deceased Angelina, who ran to the hospital in despair. "I am the soul of a little TV.
I can rarely shed a tear, but you know, when a young man in military uniform approached and asked, "Can you tell me where to find my wife and her sister?" They died in this disaster. He is in very serious condition. I think it's an acute reaction to stress.
In total, 5 people died under the rubble, 4 passers-by and a man who was working on the heating system in the city council building, which was being restored after the Russian occupation. At that time, there were several dozen people in the building. Visitors and employees of the CPAU, social services, the city council, and the tax office. Most of them are women. We were looking for people under the rubble.
We were looking for people under the rubble. Thank God they found everyone. Everyone is safe. Out of our workers at Logovo, 5 were injured, but thank God they are all alive and well. We have 1 injury, a girl inspector who had to be stitched up, so she has been hospitalized. She is currently in the hospital. The other 4 workers are receiving outpatient treatment.
People in the apartment buildings were also affected, nearby. They were injured by shards of glass and debris. Ekaterina was busy in the kitchen at that time. She says she survived the occupation and lost her grandson at the front. And this time, I almost said goodbye to life myself. Just sat down here and adjusted my hat.
I just sat down here and adjusted my hat and then it hit me. And all the glass from the window came crashing down on me. I wasn't scared at all. For some reason, I didn't realize what had happened.
In total, more than 50 people were injured, including 3 children. 2 are in stable condition, but the 14-year-old girl is in critical condition. She was sent to a hospital in Kharkiv. The regional prosecutor's office says they had no way to protect themselves from the strike. The ballistic missile arrived just seconds after the danger signal.
At the moment of impact, the air raid alarm was on, but from the time the radar systems identified the missile to the moment of impact, less than a minute passed.
The blast wave damaged dozens of buildings and shattered almost 200 windows. The utility workers worked late into the evening, clearing the debris, boarding up broken windows, and reinforcing structures that could collapse. In memory of the fallen, today is a day of mourning in the Izium community,